Okay, so this week's Sedra is Parshas Boy, and clearly it is one of the most central and fundamental Parshas in the Torah, certainly these few weeks, where we're going through the whole process of Yetzias Mitzrayim, of the Exodus, and really we're so much spoilt for choice in this week's Sedra. I'll perhaps just start off by reading out, I had so many choice of texts. This is not what's in front of you, but I can't resist just reading out the famous words of the Ramban, Nanchmanides, that you need to familiarize yourselves with at the end of this week's Sedra, where he points out that the purpose of miracle, because we experienced incredible nisim, incredible miracles in Yetzias Mitzrayim, but the purpose of it is actually to acknowledge that the Ribbono Shel Olam exists and that his sovereignty and authority extends over every aspect of nature, except, of course, that he doesn't pop up over the parapet, so to speak, the whole time, because that would mitigate our capacity for bechira, for free choice. And therefore, really, once in history, in an incredibly decisive way, he showed his hand. The Malbim says that the three categories of nes, of miracle, the progress of ideas in the three sets of the makas that we separate into Detzach, Hadash, Ba'achav, as you know, corresponds to the three elements of our emunah that we express in the Shema. Firstly, Shema Yisrael Hashem, that the Ribbono Shel Olam exists. Elokeinu, the second point, that he is our God, meaning that he's not just some distant abstract deity, but that he is intimately involved in every aspect of our lives. We call that Hashgacha Pratis. Elokeinu, our God, involved. And finally, that he is the only one, the only source of absolute power, Hashem Echad. So let's go over that again. You've got Shema Yisrael. We say Hashem, he exists, his existence. Elokeinu, that it is personal, that he is mashgiach biprotios, that he is involved in every aspect of what we see in the world. The problem is that we don't see it directly. We perceive it perhaps through the agency of what we call nature. The Chazon Ish used to call nature Hashem's most frequent set of wishes. That's all it is. It's a beautiful saying. So first of all, Hashem, that he exists, and Elokeinu, that he is mashgiach biprotius, that he is involved, and finally, that there is no other. Hashem Echad. And therefore we find three expressions when the Ribbono Shel Olam chastises Paro, and he tells him that the purpose of these miracles are, number one, Leman Teida Ki Ani Hashem, so that you should know that I exist. Leman Teida Ki Ani Hashem Bekerev Ha'oretz, so you should know that I am in the midst of the earth, I'm involved, I'm not some distant deity who's not involved. And finally, Leman Teida Ki Ein Kamoini B'chol Ha'oretz, there is no other. There's nobody like me, I'm the one and only. Those are the three ideas. But the purpose of it, of course, is miracle. The purpose of miracle is so that we know that there is a Ribbono Shel Olam, and then we then apply it, and we apply our understanding of him and his existence to the day-to-day, our day-to-day existence. And the way the Ramban puts it very famously, Umin hanissim hagdoilim hamafursamim odamoida benissim anistorim, from the blatant, overt suspension of the natural order, we realize and we recognize odamoida, a person acknowledges Nisim hanistorim, the so-called hidden miracles. Shehem yisoid haTorah kula, they are the fundament of all of the Torah. And here he says, famous phrase, She'ein la'odam chelek b'toras Moshe Rabbeinu, a man does not have any part, a person does not have any part, cannot be said to be part of the faith, so to speak. She'ein la'odam chelek b'toras Moshe Rabbeinu, we have no part in the Torah of Moshe Rabbeinu, ad shenamin, until we believe, shekol devareinu umikrenu shekulam nisim, that everything that happens to us, in essence, is miracle. Ein bahem teva uminhage shel olam. It's not nature. Bein barabim, bein biyochid. At the national level and at the personal level. Elohim yaseh ha-mitzvahs yatzlichenu scharoi. If we do mitzvahs, then we get schar. V'im yaver aleim yachrisenu onshoi. And if we transgress, then there is einish. There is punishment. In other words, let's not lose sight of the purpose of the whole spectacle of the Exodus, of Yetzias Mitzrayim, which is so fundamental. We invoke it at every turn. Wherever you turn, tzitzis, tefillin, kiddush, every kiddush is Zeichel Yetzias Mitzrayim. Yetzias Mitzrayim for a Jewish male, it's twice a day at the end of Shema. Why is it so central? Why is it so fundamental? Because it's the one time in history where the Rebbeinu Shalom revealed his hand. And for an entire year, the Makkahs took a year, the plagues took a year, the Rebbeinu Shalom made a mockery, and that's how this week's Parshas starts. Asher hisalalti b'Mitzrayim. Rashi says, sichakti, I messed around with Paroi. I played around with him. Yeah? I made a mockery of him. And this is something, and that's why the Seder night is the central ritual in Yiddishkeit. And to this day, Baruch Hashem, a very, very high percentage even of secular Jews have a Seder of some sort. It's in our blood, it's who we are, and we pass it down. Tefillin, tzitzis, mezuzah. We're surrounded by these symbols, these ideas that remind us, Yetzias Mitzrayim. Because that's when the Rebbeinu Shalom showed us once and for all an entire nation. He showed us, and we saw, and we knew clearly. Not somebody else told me, like every other religion starts, but we know, we experienced it.
The other nations also experienced it.
They definitely, but it's not in their interest to recount it. I mean, I very rarely quote Ben Gurion. Remember the quote?
Yes.
Rarely quote him, because by no stretch of the imagination was he a religious Jew, was he frum. By no stretch of the imagination, that's to put it mildly. But when he came before the committee of the United Nations in 1947 to plead the case, to argue the case that we deserve getting the land, what did he invoke? When the chips are down, what does a secular Jew invoke? What does he? He said words. I'm not quoting verbatim. You can get the text of the speech, but he said words to the effect that some 200 years ago, a ship set sail. The Mayflower set sail from England to found the colonies to America, and they landed on Plymouth Rock, as you know. And he said, go into an American primary school or high school or even college and ask them, do they know who was on that ship? Do we know what they ate, what they drank, what they wore, the route that they took, the path that they took? They will know very, very little. But go into any thousands, and that was only 200 years later, and that was a seminal event in the founding of the New World. Go into any Jewish primary school. In Morocco, in Iran, in Russia, in Israel, in America, in France, in England, wherever you want. And go and ask them and say, when did we leave Egypt? We left Egypt on the 15th day of Nisan in the year 2448. And what did we wear? Our loins were girded. What did we eat? We ate matzah. Which route did we take? We went through Sukkos and Ramses. We know exactly where we went. We know the exact path that we took. And that's recounted every year in every Jewish household, in most Jewish households. And we finish Lashon Haba Yerushalayim. That's our claim to the land. That's a historical claim. Even Ben Gurion realized when the chips were down. And that was his claim. So that's by way of introduction. That's not the central idea we're going to discuss tonight, but that is by way of introduction. Okay, what I want to start with you tonight, what you have there in front of you, is an idea, or rather it's actually, as we'll see, it's a machlokas. There is a famous argument, and this is classical Jewish philosophy, basic and important hashkafa, and it touches on the interaction between, to some extent, one aspect of the big issue of Hashem's foreknowledge and our ability to choose, and the consequences and ramifications of those actions. Because what you have in front of you here is a Ramban. It's the commentary of the Ramban, Nanchmanides, in Lech Lecha. When Hashem appears to Avram and he foretells that we are going to have to go down to be strangers in an alien land and undergo servitude for 400 years, and eventually we will exit Berechush Gadol, wealthy. So it says as follows, Yodoya Teda, the famous formulation, without going into the hows and the whys and the whats, but just Yodoya Teda, the bare bones, the facts are, Yodoya Teda ki geri ezaracha, says Hashem to Avram, you shall surely know that your children will be ger, they will be strangers in a strange land. Va'avodum ve'inu oisom, they will enslave them and they will afflict them for 400 years. V'gam es hagoy asher ya'avoidu don anoichi, and also the nation that enslaves them I will judge. I will punish the nation that enslaves them, and afterwards they will go out. And the question over here is, what is this word v'gam? And also the nation that enslaves them I will judge. Just miss out that word v'gam. The pasuk would not have suffered in its meaning at all had it omitted that word. Just say, and the nation that serves them, they will get judged, they will be punished for the servitude that they inflict upon the Jewish nation. What's the v'gam? And also. So, we'll start with this bit of the Ramban. V'hanochoin be'enai. This is the first thing on your sheets there. Says the Ramban, V'hanochoin be'enai, and that which is correct in my eyes is as follows. Kitam v'gam. The meaning of the word v'gam is as follows. Af al pi sha'ani gozarti al zaracho lihiyos geirim be'eretz lo lohem va'avodum ve'inu oisom. Despite the fact that I decreed on your descendants that they are going to be enslaved in a foreign land, va'avodum ve'inu oisom, and they will be enslaved and they will be afflicted. Despite that fact, that is the meaning of the word v'gam. Despite the fact that I've decreed it, it's set in stone, so to speak. It has to be. The chiddush is v'gam. The innovation is afal pikei, nevertheless. Eshpoit es hagoy asher yavoidu al asher yasu lahem. I will judge the nation that for what they do to them. V'lo yipotru ba'avur she'osu gzeiroisai. They're not going to be let off the hook merely by invoking the divine excuse and say, well, there's a divine decree. This was an edict. And we'll come on to that a little bit more later. Perhaps they could even argue, dare I say it, we're doing a mitzvah. We're fulfilling a divine decree. So the Ramban says as follows, that the meaning of the word v'gam is as follows. Despite the fact that I have decreed it and it has to be, nonetheless, I will judge. There is an element of judgment that needs to take place over here, over the nations that enslave them. What does that mean? What element of judgment is necessary? V'hatam, says the Ramban, K'moshe Omar HaKosuv, similar to the pasuk that we find in Zechariah, where the pasuk says, V'kinesi l'Yerushalayim u'letzion kino gedola, v'ketzef godol ani kotzef al hagoyim asher ani kotzafti ma'at v'hema ozru l'ra. The Novi says, the prophet Zechariah says as follows, I will be zealous, says Hashem, for Jerusalem and for Zion, for Yerushalayim and for Tzion, kino gedola v'ketzef godol, and great anger, ani kotzef al hagoyim asher I will execute over the nations. Why? Asher ani kotzafti ma'at. For I was somewhat enraged. Vehema ozru l'ra, but they helped very much the evil. Va'ima kotzafti al ami chalalti nachlosi. So he uses this principle from a pasuk, a verse in Zechariah, pasuk in Zechariah, where Hashem says, I was, to some extent, I was angry with Klal Yisrael, but the nations went beyond and above the call of duty. Now he fleshes it out. V'chein hoya b'Mitzrayim. Says the Ramban, this was true in Egypt. Shehoisifu leheira. They added on. They were very evil. Ki hishlichu b'neihem layor. They threw their children into the river. Vayemoraru es chayeyim. They embittered their lives. V'choshvu limchos es shmam. And they wanted to wipe out their name. V'zetam don anoichi. Says the Ramban, this is the meaning of don anoichi. That's the v'gam. This is the don anoichi over here. She'ovi yosom b'mishpat. Says the Ramban, I will judge. What's the judgment? That's the v'gam. So the v'gam goes as follows. Despite the fact that there's a divine edict, there's a decree that they're going to be enslaved, nonetheless, I will exact punishment or a judgment on what point? I will judge them. Im osu kenigzar aleim. Well, what did they do? If they did exactly as was decreed, the implication of the Ramban is that that's fine. That's okay. Or perhaps they went above and beyond the call of duty, and they willingly embraced the decree of enslaving them and throwing their kids into the river and embittering their lives. Certainly was never part of the divine plan. That they did on their own initiative, and for that there will be punishment.
I don't understand.
Okay, so slow down. We'll see. You might be in good company, possibly.
Because Hashem allowed it. He allowed it.
Slow down. No. Okay, so let me make maybe a quick introduction. We are not going to be discussing the apparent paradox between Hashem's foreknowledge and our free will. That, although it does impact it to some extent, Hashem knows everything, Sharon, yeah, right? He knows everything, right? And yet we have Hakol Sofui v'Horashus Mesuna is the famous formulation in the Mishnah. Hakol Sofui, everything is foreseen, and yet the permission is granted. And we act as autonomous moral agents. In fact, if you really want to take it a drop deeper, the Nefesh HaChaim, the Kisei Arizal, the others, do you know the real manifestation of Tselem Elokim? Maybe I'll digress for 1 minute. Try and make it not more than one. You're smiling very knowingly. Tselem Elokim. We use that term. Tselem Elokim. Why Elokim? Why not Tselem Hashem? Tselem Yud Kei Vav Kei. Why do we say Tselem Elokim? So asks the Nefesh HaChaim, and he explains that Elokim is a very specific term that connotes. In fact, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim Siman Hey. When we say Elokim, you're meant to have the following in mind: Takif ubala yecholes ubala koiches kulam. That the Rabbeinu Shalom is absolutely powerful. In simple English, he's the boss. And the advantage of being the boss, so I am told, is that you can do whatever you want. That's what being a boss means. A real boss. A real boss.
Why is that evident by Elokim?
No, that's what Elokim means.
Oh.
Elokim is Takif. This is the lashon of the Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
Takif, ubal hayecholes, ubal hakoiches kulam. Okay, I don't want to go too deep. That's why it's in the plural. Thought we only had one God. Yeah, we do. We only have one. But Elokim, it's also gematria hateva, as Rabbeinu Bechai says. So it means he is the unified and the only source of anything that you can encounter in the world. But it means more than that, and that's why when we say at the end of Yom Kippurim, by the way, Hashem Hu Elokim, what does that mean in simple English? He is the boss. It means he's the boss. He's in charge and he can do whatever he wants. He created us, b'tselem Elokim. Tselem does not mean, of course, in any way that he has no image. Again, his incorporeality is an integral part of our emunah. He has no image, shape, or form at all. But what does it mean? Tselem means, Nefesh HaChaim explains that Tselem means that we are comparable in some way to the Rabbeinu Shleilam. And therefore, since Tselem Elokim means that we have a godlike aspect, an Elokim-like aspect. He created us and gave us the capacity that in some respects we are exactly like him. What does that mean? It means that in the same way he can do whatever he wants, we can do whatever we want. We can act autonomously as moral agents. We have bechira. That is the real manifestation. How we do that manifests through neshama, without going into the mechanics of it, but that is the concept, right?
Oh, who was it that said that Tselem Elokim
that's
relates to bechira?
Nefesh HaChaim and Rizal and so many. So Sharon, so that's really, so we're not really dealing directly with that. We're dealing directly here with culpability. What we're discussing here tonight, at least some of what we're going to discuss, is culpability in the face of a divine decree. See, because here there had been a decree, or so it would, or so it seems, and we'll see. The Ramban is going to argue. The Meshech will take a different view. Let's try and get on with the material. So, to be clear, the Ramban invokes a posuk in Zechariah to establish the following principle: that even though there may be a divine decree, there will still be din, there will still be judgment as to whether the letter of the law was fulfilled or as to whether they went beyond. That's what he said so far. And throwing kids into the river was never included in the Va'avodim Ve'inu Oisam. They were going way beyond. And this is what is meant, and more than that, they wanted to exterminate us, he said. V'choshvu limchai says Shemam. They actually wanted to annihilate us and exterminate us. V'zeh ta'am don anoichi. And this is the meaning of the phrase, don anoichi, I will judge. What will that mean? Sha'ovi oisam ba'mishpat. I'll bring them, I will enter into judgment with them. Imasu can exer aleim. Did they do as was decreed? Oy hoisifu lehir alehem. Did they do more? V'zeh ma sha'oma Yisroi, says the Ramban beautifully. This is what Yisroi meant when he said ki badovar asher zodu aleihem. Remember, Yisroi was part of Paro's inner circle, and he was able then to see the midah k'neged midah. He was able to, because he knew what they were plotting, and he knew how the rebound, when it hit them, how it fitted, how the punishment fitted the crime so perfectly and so exactly. But he used a very interesting word there. He said ki badovar asher zodu aleihem, in the matter in which they acted willfully. Zodu, mezid, zodoim. In the manner in which they acted willfully, aleihem, that rebounded on them. Ki hazodoin hu shehevi aleim oinish hagodol. It is that element of willful. They did it because they wanted to do it. Now, I must admit, he seems to be. I don't want to complicate things too much. But we have to be always very respectful when learning a mefarish such as the Ramban. The Rishonim wrote with tremendous dichonos. They wrote with tremendous precision. He seems to be. I'll just throw a thought out and I'll leave it. He seems to be actually adding something with this thing from Yisroi. He seems to be saying. He starts off saying that it is a question, almost a question of quantity. He starts off by saying it seems to be a question of quantity. In other words, Hashem said, yes, they're to be enslaved, they're to be afflicted. And had they stuck to the plan, had the Egyptians stuck to the plan, there would have been no judgment. The judgment was whether they were hoisifu, and he starts off and he actually uses the word, if you're learning this properly, hoisifu lahar alahem. They added on, they did more. But then he introduces the proof that he brings from Yisroi, if we're to learn this properly, the proof that he brings from Yisroi introduces another quality. It introduces the quality of intent. Surely the intent is irrelevant. It's not about the intent. It's about the quantity, not the quality, surely. What's his proof from Yisro? I'm tempted to reinterpret the Ramban somewhat to suggest that what the Ramban is saying is that the quality, i.e. the motivation, you can call it quality, you call it the motivation is revelatory as to everything that they were doing. And they then maybe have been culpable for the whole lot. Possibly. He introduces motivation. See, initially he starts off saying, and this may be germane later, he starts off saying it's all about did they do what was decreed or did they go above and beyond. He then says about Yisro, he brings a proof from Yisro where it says, Zodu, they did it intentionally. Well, surely intent is not the issue. Motivation is not the issue. Is it an issue of quantity?
Did they get carried away while they were doing it, or were they intended to overdo it? Is that what you're trying to say?
Not quite. And he almost seems, I don't want to get too hung up on this, but he almost seems to be, I wouldn't say quite contradicting himself, Chas v'shalom, but he starts off by saying it seems to be a simple quantitative thing that the Rebbe says. I need to go and be don anoichi, to see, did they do what I said, or did they do more? Intention wouldn't really come into it on the basis of that formulation. He then goes on to say, and he brings the proof from Yisro, where he brings the kibadova asher zodu, in that which they were willful. It's the zodoin. It's the question is, what does the zodoin do? It needs some thinking about.
But they're together, because you don't accidentally throw children into the Nile.
Oh, definitely.
So the fact that they went above and beyond the letter of the law with the decree is connected to the fact that they did it. They did it.
They are definitely connected.
They did it willfully.
Yeah. They're definitely connected. My question is whether once there is intent, would that then tell me something about the whole everything? I don't know. Okay, I mean, I think we have to stick with what he says, which is that it was about how much they did. They went beyond. However, the Rambam, Maimonides, does not agree. V'horav nosantam b'sefer hamada. And the Rambam says the following in Sefer Hamada. The Rambam is in Hilchos Tshuva. And really this opens up a huge topic. We're just skimming it here. But this is really fundamental knowledge here. V'horav nosantam b'sefer hamada. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says as follows. Lefi shelo gozar al ish yodua. Why is it that they get punished? Why are the Egyptians getting punished? He says, Lefi shelo gozar al ish yodua. Because the decree was unspecified. The Rebbeinu Shalom didn't say the Egyptians should enslave them. It just says Hagoyas asher yavodu be'eretz lo lahem. They'll be in a foreign land, an alien land. That's all it says. Lefi shelo gozar al ish yodua. There was no decree about any specific personal nation. V'chol oisam hamariyim li Yisrael, and therefore each of those that oppressed Klal Yisrael, ilu lo rotza kol echad mehem reshus biyodai. If any of them would have wanted not to do so, nobody was forcing them. There was no compulsion for them particularly, specifically to do it. Any person in the world, any other nation in the world could have easily have said, I'm not going to do it. And you didn't have to do it. There was no decree on any specific person. That is what the Rambam writes. So we have a machlokas, Rambam and Ramban, and the Raiva decides with the Ramban, okay. And the machlokas is as follows. The Ramban writes, it's about whether they went beyond. The Rambam says, no, it's about that they did anything at all, because I didn't ask any specific person to do it. Therefore, the practical difference between the Rambam and Ramban, what's going to be the biggest practical difference? Whether they get, let's quantify it for a second.
What they're getting punished for. I mean,
that's right. What are you going to get punished for? Let's quantify it for a second. Let's just give it numbers for argument's sake. 0 to 5, 5 to 10. Let's say the Rebbeinu Shalom said 0 to 5. That's how much that va'avodum ve'inu oisam. That's how much. And then the Mitzrayim went up from 5 to 10, and they inflicted extra pain and threw the kids in the Nile, etc., etc. So according to the Ramban, they get punished for the 5. The difference between the second 5. According to the Rambam, they get punished for the whole thing, because nobody asked you to do it at all. Nobody decreed that you should do it at all.
Would this be a general principle?
Oh, yes.
When there's a divine
Yes, we're gonna-
any nation
Yes.
who could actually.
Very good. We're going to come to that in a minute. The Ramban says, I don't like this at all. He does. V'loi niskenu dvarav etzli, says the Ramban. I don't agree. His words don't sit easily with me. She'afilu gozar she'echod mikol ha'umois yori alehem bekach v'kach. Because he says that's not an argument. Here's a fascinating Ramban. Says the Ramban, that is not an argument. Because according to the Rambam, the whole point is, what was it specified? Says the Ramban, that's not the point. Because what would be if Hashem would specify? She'afilu gozar she'echod mikol ha'umois yori alehem bekach v'kach. Even had he decreed that a specific nation should treat Klal Yisrael evilly, and somebody else would have jumped in. Let's say Hashem says, the Egyptians, let's say he would have said explicitly, the Egyptians are to enslave the Jewish people. And then an Emorite would have jumped in and said, I'm really frum, I want to do a mitzvah. I hear there's a mitzvah going. Right? The fact that it happens to be exterminating Jews is purely coincidental, of course. But I hear there's a mitzvah going and I want to do a mitzvah. This is a decree. Says the Ramban, V'kodam zev ha'asa gzeirasa shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Somebody jumps in there and he does the gzeira of Hashem. Zocha b'dvar mitzvah. He got a mitzvah. There's no reason he should be punished. The specificity, if there is such a word, I think there is, the whether Hashem had specified a particular person or not, says the Ramban, is irrelevant. If Hashem wanted it done, it becomes a mitzvah. Now hold on. That's what the Ramban says. And therefore, according to the Ramban, you only get punished if you go above and beyond. According to the Rambam, you get punished for the whole thing because nobody asked you to do it. The Meshech Chochmah says, just a quick note. Yeah, we're no by no means finished. We're just getting started. I specifically picked this because it's a classic. It really is a classic. This is a classic everybody should know in Hashkafa. You've got the Ramban in Lech Lecha. You file it away and then you bring it out when you need to. It's important. The Meshech Chochmah says he tries to resolve the Rambam by saying that he says the Ramban would be all well and good if it was written if it was couched in the language of imperative, if it was couched in the language of a command. Right?
But here, or you're just telling us the Meshech Chochmah?
That's what I'm just telling you the Meshech Chochmah. But he says, but over here it wasn't couched in the language of a command. There's no command. It's not relevant over here. Command. It is a narrative. This is what will be, and there's no divine command. That's what the Meshech Chochmah says. Okay, it's again another aspect, something to think about. Hashem is telling Avram, this is a prophecy. This is what will be. Anyway, we're going to explore this further.
Is there a difference between command and decree?
No. Not. I mean,
okay.
I certainly wasn't.
But we're all about overturning decrees. I mean, a decree can be overturned. We say, that tshuva, tzedakah.
That's
tefillah.
very debatable. If we get time, you've got some stuff there on the sheet. Do you overturn? Do you mitigate? Do you transpose? Do you transform? There are 4 or 5 different major opinions in the Rishonim as to how this works. That's another. As I say, it's a huge topic, but just getting started. We're just doing the bare bones here. So the Ramban argues with the Rambam. He says no. He says if it is a decree, then you don't get punished, even if somebody else jumps in and does it. Umatam bidvarov. And what's the reason? If the king decrees that a member of the country should do a certain action, if somebody's lazy and lets other people do it, see what the Rambam is saying, somebody else everybody could and should have turned around and said, not me, I don't need to do it, let somebody else do it. Says the Ramban, no, you don't have that option. If the king says that it is to be done, then the right thing to do is to jump in and do it. That's the right thing to do. So by jumping in and doing it per se, the Egyptians were not doing anything wrong, says the Ramban. And he brings a mashal. He says if a king decrees that XYZ should happen, then if you're a loyal citizen, your civic duty is to jump in there and do the command of the king. And if you are lazy, if you're misrashel umatel adavar lacheirim, and you allow others to do it, you are a sinner. And somebody that does it, yofik rotzen mimenu. Okay, and there are a couple of other details here. We're going to skip just a little bit. You can see this is going to take a while. Hold on a second. Okay. He then restates his own position that the purpose of the judgment was because they went above and beyond the call of duty. That's the Ramban's own position, and he then just goes on and restates that. Now go to where it says V'da v'hovein. Yep, V'da v'hovein. This is very, very fundamental. And know and understand, says the Ramban. V'da v'hovein. Know and understand. Ki haish shenichtav v'nechtam b'Rosh Hashanah lahariga. What would be if somebody, God forbid, it is decreed, it is signed and sealed on Rosh Hashanah? I don't know whether we can make a meal out of that, whether it's Rosh Hashanah as opposed to Yom Kippur, whatever. I don't know. Somebody that is written, signed and sealed on Rosh Hashanah lahariga, that God forbid he is to be killed. Just because somebody has been, that is the divine decree. Lo yinoke halistim ahoireg oisoi ba'avur she'osa mashenigzar olav. That will not exculpate, that will not let off the hook the murderer. If somebody in that year then pulls the trigger and kills him, the fellow, imagine he's a frum murderer, right? So he stands up before the judge and says, what is your defense? He says, I don't deny the facts, but clearly if this person died, then there must have been a divine decree for him to die, and therefore really, all I was doing was a mitzvah, I suppose. I was really doing a mitzvah, Your Honor, because obviously there must have been such a divine decree. Says the Ramban, don't be silly. That's even though the two go hand in hand. It is possible for a person to have that there was a divine decree that he will be killed in that year. Lo yinoke. The bandit, the murderer who kills him, is not let off the hook in any way, shape or form. He himself gets put to death. If it's a capital offence, right? If there's evidence and warning, etc. Just because he did the gzeira, hu rosha ba'avoino yomus. He, the rosha, the victim, will die as a result of his sins. If Hashem has decreed that somebody is going to be killed or die in that year, he will die. Hu rosha ba'avoino yomus. He'll die as a result of his sins. V'domai miyad haritzeach yivukash. But nevertheless, his blood will be sought from his murderer. That is, if there is a divine decree which is on Rosh Hashanah. Avol kasher teitzei hagzeira al pinovi. But that's different. When the gzeira comes out through the agency of a prophet, of a novi, yesh ba'isa oisa dinim, then we have to start. Then there is din. Then we need to look and see what happens. Ki imshama oisa v'rotza lasos ritzoin boiroi kenigzar. If a fellow overheard, he heard the prophecy, and he wants, now here is where I go back to what I said before about the Zodom. If he hears this prophecy, and he wishes to do a mitzvah, he wants to do the wishes of his creator, kenigzar, as was decreed, ein olov chet avol yeshlei zechusboi. There is no sin, there is actually a merit. Right? Kasher Omar beyehu. Okay, we're not going to go into the proof. Miss out a line. Avolim shoma ha-mitzvah.
Yehu.
Yehu, Yehu's a person in Novi. He's bringing a proof here. Yana shetivoisa lasas hayosha ben ikhala shebel vav yasis levnei achov yeshu lechal kisei Yisrael. Avolim shoma ha-mitzvah v'horag oisoi lesina. And here you see clearly the Ramban is bringing back that which I touched on before, motivation. Motivation is key here. So, if you are not privy to any divine knowledge or any divine decrees, then, of course, if you go and kill somebody, that's murder, and it's a capital offence. What would be if you hear a nevuah? You know that there is a prophecy, that so-and-so, that there is a job to be done here, and it may be a not a particularly pleasant job, but there is a divine decree, there is a prophecy. Then somebody who jumps in and does it, it depends. What does it depend on? Your motivation. What are you motivated by? He says, if you do it, shoma oisav arotzalasas ritzoin boiroi kenigzar, and what you want to do is fulfill the divine decree. You want to do a mitzvah, that's fine. That's fine. Avolim shoma ha-mitzvah v'horagoisoi l'sina oi lishloilosoi, but if you heard this mitzvah and you killed him out of your own hatred, or you want to delete him, it's probably the best way of putting it, yes, yesh alav ha'oinash, then you get a punishment, ki hu lechet niskaven va'aveira huloi, because you had kavana for an aveira, your motivation was for an aveira, va'aveira huloi, and that is an aveira. Here we have an absolutely fascinating thing, and again, time doesn't permit to go through the whole thing in depth. As of course you are aware, a mitzvah, generally speaking, a mitzvah, the best translation for mitzvah comes miloshen tzavsa, miloshen tzevet. It means a mitzvah is a cosmically connected act. That's what a mitzvah is. An act that has incredible, anybody who learns the deeper Sfarim understands that when a person does a mitzvah, you are connecting. It is a physical trigger that connects us in ways that we don't understand and releases divine influence in all the dimensions flowing from where Hashem's energy flows and light flows from his very existence all the way down as it is stepped down through all the various dimensions until it reaches us here. And that's any mitzvah. That's ben adam la makom, ben adam la chaveira. It makes no difference. Any mitzvah. And actually the bar is set relatively low insofar as something being considered a mitzvah. All you need is a very general awareness that I'm about to perform a mitzvah. That's all you need. You don't need to be a Kabbalist. You don't need to have an understanding of which olam and which partzuf and which of the spheres and which of the... You don't need to know any of that stuff. You need to have a broad, general awareness and an intention. I'm going to do a mitzvah.
Is your motivation important? Are you doing it to make yourself feel good, or are you doing
That's exactly the point I'm making.
Okay.
That's exactly the point I'm making. It is irrelevant.
Right.
Why is it irrelevant? I need to give you a mashal. I always give this to my talmidim. In school I do it with them once and then they get it and they never ask questions again. Because it's a very simple analogy. No, that's not what I meant. I apologize. The mashal I give them is as follows. A very simple, the best I can do. Rebellia gives a slightly different mashal. He uses the mashal of the telephone, but I've got a very simple mashal. Very simple mashal. NASA is sending a satellite up to Mars, and it is going to do amazing things for science and technology and medicine and blah blah blah. And it takes them, as it sometimes does, a decade. It's a decade in the making, and it costs billions of dollars, and it involves teams, hundreds, millions of lines of code are written to prepare the whole thing. And there are, as you know, they're astronomical, their budget and what they spend and how they prepare, and there's this huge thing, and it's all ready, and it's incredibly exciting. And they decide that they're going to honor the 10-year-old daughter of the program director, to cut the ribbon and to press that shiny red button that is going to launch, that will connect the final circuit and launch this thing up into... What qualifications does that 10-year-old girl need to have? She needs to know how to press a shiny red button. She doesn't need to know aerodynamics or astrophysics or computer programming or aeronautics. None of this stuff. It's totally irrelevant. She just needs to know how to press a shiny red button. That's what happens. Each time we do a mitzvah, we don't have any understanding of what we're really doing. We are creating, and that's besides for any of the other attendant advantages. I'm not even going to the point of how we better ourselves in terms of midas and all that other stuff. I'm only focusing on the purely spiritual side of it. a mitzvah is a connected act. Tzeves. So it is a connected act, and we see the Rebbeinu Shalom says it is connected. The last little thing is putting those leather straps on your arm, eating kosher, whatever it is, Shmiras Shabbos, whatever it is. That's all we see. We see that tiny little bit, and therefore all we need for it to be considered a mitzvah is a very broad and vague awareness. And even if there are the motivation that may accompany it, as you point out quite rightly, the motivation that may accompany it could be, I enjoy it, I want schar, I don't want to burn in hell if I don't do it. I mean, there's a million and one, a myriad of all sorts, and we call that shaloi lishma. It doesn't matter. Because you're doing amazing things. What actually happens is it goes up to Shamayim, it gets judged for quality, etc. And then there's a trickle-down charge. Electricity is one of the best analogies for this, by the way. Electricity is one of the best analogies. Imagine you take your iPod. I always say, take your iPod and go to Sellafield and try and plug it in, because I want some electricity for my iPod. What will happen? It'll just shatter. That happened to us once in history. We plugged into the mainframe, and Matan Torah, that's what happened. We plugged in direct, boom, nafshi yotza b'dabrei. It just, we blew our casing. And therefore what happens is, it goes down, the Hashem's energies and light and influence gets stepped down. Substation, transformer, fuse box. And it's more than just a muscle, but think about it, but it's and then we get this tiny little trickle down charges, little bit of kedusha, and the rest is waiting. The first place the Ramchal writes in Derech Hashem, the first place after we pass away, we go to, we're tired when we pass away. We're very tired. The person, the essence, the neshama is tired. We've been worn down by physicality for so many years. The first thing we do is we go to Olam HaNeshamas. We just recharge. We go to a recharging station. We receive the charge of everything that because ultimately in Olam Haba, you inhabit the environment that you created for yourself. You inhabit that environment. You created it. You create it, and you inhabit it for all of eternity. There's nothing there. You understand? You create it. Anyway, I'm getting carried away. So how do we get onto this? Yes. So here, this is just so that you appreciate the enormity of what the Ramban is saying over here. Because when we talk about a mitzvah in the classical sense, it is the action that is key. It is the action that connects. And the motivation is secondary. And therefore, let me just finish there. And the motivation, to some extent, is secondary in terms of it doing what it's meant to be doing. Over here, we're seeing the exact opposite. It's actually almost the categorization, the classification of what you are doing. Whether this is a mitzvah or not depends on your act, depends on your motivation. Why that is beyond the scope of this. But it is important for us to appreciate the enormity of what he's saying. So when you hear a Navi, so again, let's just go over this, let's get this clear. Let's at least get the facts clear. The facts are as follows. If there is a divine decree which you are not privy to, it's decreed on Rosh Hashanah that somebody's going to get shot or they're going to die or whatever, and you step in and you do it, you can't stand up there in front of the judge and say, no, that's definitely an Aveira, because you were not privy to it, and there's no, Hu Rosha B'avoino Yomus, V'domoi miyad haretzeach Yivukash, famous words. But if there is a gzeira from a Navi, there is a decree from a Navi, and you hear that, and you step in to do the mitzvah. Is it a mitzvah? Isn't it a mitzvah? It depends wholly on your intent. If your intent is solely to do the Ratzon Habayra, then it's good. It's the right thing to do. If not, Pinchas, very good. That's a very good parallel. There are some other parallels where the whole definition depends totally on your kavanah. Yes?
So our case is like
Let's see. We're not finished yet. That's a good question.
Do they know?
Well, so far we don't have that data yet. We need to push on. And then he brings a bunch of proofs from Sancheirav and Nebuchadnezzar. And if you go to, I don't want to get through the whole thing, go to the bottom of page 1. Vehinei Nebuchadnezzar Shoma. Nebuchadnezzar had heard Ki hanavim pe echad koirim oisoi lahachriv Yerushalayim. He knew that he was called upon. They had all called out and said that he should come and destroy Yerushalayim. They specifically were invited to do so on the bidding of a prophet, etc. And it says it mentioned him by name. It mentioned him by name.
The Navi here is Yirmiyahu.
Well, it says more than one, but that'll do. It'll do for the moment. It says Hanaviim pe echad.
And pe echad is from the mouth of the Navi.
No, kulam pe echad means numerous Nevi'im all saying the same thing. That's the meaning over here, right? And Vehim Yodim, I'm skipping a little bit. Vehim Yodim, where is it in yours? Over on page 2, the middle of the third line. Vehim Yodim ki mitzvahs Hashem. He, was Radan Yirmiyah. They knew it was a mitzvah. They knew it was a mitzvah. Va'afal pikein, nonetheless, ne'enshu ha'kastiyim kulam basoif. Nevertheless, the Babylonians were punished, even though it was explicit from the Navi. He was actually mentioned in dispatches. He was meant. Why is this? Next paragraph. Says the Ramban, this was for two reasons. Ha'echad shegam hu niskaven lahashmid kol haaretz lahagdil memshaltai. Because his intention was to destroy Klal Yisrael for the purposes of imperial consolidation and territorial expansion. That was his purpose. So that's the one reason that he gets punished. That's on the basis of what he said before. His intention was negative, was malicious. Aval hoya, go to the last paragraph there. Aval hoya b'melech Bavel oynesh acher. There was another oynesh, another punishment he gets. Shehoisif al agzeira v'heira li Yisrael yoser ma'oid. He did more. Two things here. So here we see two things. We see clearly here now the opinion of the Ramban becomes solidified. And we get it clearly. Number one, the Babylonians were punished for two reasons. Number one, because their intention was malicious. Their intention was not to do a mitzvah. Number one. Number two, and that's probably what he meant before when he said, Badav Asher Zodu. Right? And number two, because they did more. So Hashem got them on two counts. And as you said, Ariella, you're probably right. They are connected. But I think there is a difference now, because now, on the first point, on the first count, it will be for everything. It won't just be for the bit that they added on. Like the Rambam, in that aspect, he'll be like the Rambam, that you'll get punished for for everything, because you didn't have a good intention. Your intention was malicious, and therefore it's not a mitzvah.
Wait, so now the Ramban would be also saying that you're going to be punished for the whole thing because your intention isn't the Ramban, if you're now based on what he's saying about intention?
Yes.
If your intention wasn't to serve Hashem,
correct.
Really,
then the whole thing is correct. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Absolutely. He's wrote it back slightly. Va'al kain, just to finish this off. It's the second line of the end of the second line of the last paragraph. Va'al kain ba'aleim oynesh kaful u'mechupol shenishmad zaroi legamrei. Therefore, they had a double punishment, and they were wiped out totally. And the Navi says, Pasuk in Yeshaya, V'lo yihyeh lebavel shem u'she'er nin v'neched v'nishmada iroi la'olamim. Iraq, Nebuchadnezzar was his city was destroyed and was in ruins. Saddam, 2,000 years later, was trying to rebuild because there was nothing there, and look how long that lasted. Because the Navi came and said, that's it, you're done, you're finished, you're gone, you're going to be totally annihilated and decimated. Why, says the Ramban? For two reasons. Number one, your intention is malicious. And therefore, even though it was a gzeira from a Navi, and even though the Navi, you know the Gemara says in Gittin, when before he came, he did this whole spiel. It wasn't a spiel. He shot arrows, and whichever direction he shot the arrows, miraculously they turned and faced Yerushalayim. And he stopped a child from Yerushalayim coming out and asked him, what posuk did you learn today? He did lots of things. He was called upon by God, directly, specifically, to destroy Yerushalayim. He went wrong in two ways. He did it because he wanted to do it, not because it was the command of Hashem. Number two, he went wrong because he went above and beyond the call of duty. And in a nutshell, that's all we've managed to do. But this is a fundamental Ramban. It's a it's a classic. It's a classic Ramban. Yes.
Who didn't? Who wasn't in that category? Who isn't in that category?
And don't you have to believe in the God Hashem?
That's right.
Obviously.
And most of our, if not all, haven't believed.
I'm not sure. Okay, that's a moot point. The point is a couple of things. Let's just do a quick summary. So we started off with the Ramban saying v'gam es hagoy. The gam. What is the gam? Gam es hagoy sheyavodu don anochi. They'll be judged. Why? So he starts off by saying to see whether they did more. Initially in the Ramban, it looked as if they did as they were told, it would have been okay. Although then he throws us a slight curveball by bringing in ashezodu, the intention, and we quite rightly picked up that was going to be significant later on. Then he brings the Rambam, who says that it's because it's all about whether it was a specified person or not. Right? The Meshech Chochmah rejects that on the basis of saying that it wasn't a decree anyway, it was a narrative, it was just a prophetic narrative here. And then we have the Ramban, who comes along and says this big yesod, that when a person does something, kills somebody, or does the bidding of Hashem, when he is not unaware that it's the bidding of Hashem, then there's no question. If you murder somebody, then you can't rely on a defense of saying, well, it must have been decreed on Rosh Hashanah. But if you heard from a Navi, telling you to do it, specifically, as was the case with Nebuchadnezzar, it would depend, number one, on your intention, and number two, whether you went above and beyond the call of duty.
So why all this business of harm?